and welcome to our third installment of Hatfield Sessions. Today, we'll be learning more about what it means to say yes to purpose from Pastor Louis Kutzer, the senior pastor here at Hatfield Christian Church. We're joined by our fantastic panel, Pastor Mabatu Bahana, who's been a pastor here at Hatfield Christian Church for 14 years. Not only that, but she's a wife and mother of two beautiful girls and always has a valuable piece of wisdom to share with those around her. Pastor Mal Radley is also a pastor here at Hatfield Christian Church. Mal has a passion for teaching the Word of God and has led various Bible studies and community groups over the years. Our guest today is Saisen Kunda, who's been a member here at Hatfield for over 12 years. She's a social tech entrepreneur and businesswoman who's passionate about equipping young women and youth with IT skills in preparation for future work. Thank you all for being here today. Let me ask you, Pastor Louis, is there meaning in life?
Thank you, Nemi. Hey, guys, it's so good to be with you. I trust that you're enjoying our sessions and learning so much about what it means to say yes to Jesus. I mean, that's a great question. Have you ever felt like life is just random? You know, I think we all go through times where we're thinking, is there any purpose to all of this that I'm experiencing? Or as I'm watching the world and so many of the events around the world, I think of the pandemic recently and we go, is there purpose to it all? Is there meaning? Or is life just random? I often ask that question when I go through various things. The other day I was rushing to drive to a meeting that I had to be at, and when I got to my car, the tire was flat. And I go, why? Why does this have to happen to me now? And that's a silly little thing, but perhaps even in bigger things in life. We face trauma, we face disappointment, we face loss. And it's often in those times where we question, is there purpose and meaning? When we see so much struggle in the world, we go, why? Why is all of this going on? What's happening? Now, I want to tell you this, that according to the scripture, there's purpose. Our lives have purpose. Each of us was made by God on purpose and with a purpose. The psalmist writes in Psalm 139, verse 19, and he says these wonderful, beautiful words. He says, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Each of us was not just happens to be on this earth, but made by God, crafted by God. We were an idea before we even existed. And that idea was in God's heart and mind, and He made us on purpose and with a purpose. I think that should encourage us. But why is it that we so often feel like there's no purpose? There's no reason. There seems to be just life and the randomness of it. Well, I think we have to recognize, first of all, that as humanity, so much of what we do is not about God anymore. We've walked away from Him. If He made us on purpose and with a purpose, but we break our relationship with Him, then we will lose something of that sense of purpose. If I was made by God with a purpose, but I no longer know God and have a relationship with God, how am I going to know what my purpose is? How am I going to know how I function and who I should be? Who do I ask? Then I'm left to figure it out on my own. And so many of us today, we don't have a relationship with God where He can show us why He made us and how He made us and how we're supposed to live. We left to our own designs and our own devices and we figure it out. And we think that it's the best way I can live life is if I figure it out for myself on my own. And that I'm going to discover my purpose in that. But just think about it. If you were made by God, your purpose, your sense of value comes from outside of yourself, therefore. But now you don't refer to that. You try and figure it out inside of yourself only. Then you're not going to get it right. It stands to reason. So we think we're going to figure this out on our own. Or then I'm going to ask other people. If I can't figure it out on my own, who I am and what I'm made for and what my purpose is and what the purpose of life is, I'm going to ask other people. But just think about that. How can I ask somebody else what my purpose in life is? Because they are the same level as I am. They have the same viewpoint or access to knowledge that I have. They didn't make me. They weren't there the moment that I was a thought before I even existed. They weren't there. God didn't consult anybody else to say, when I made person X, I'm going to make them. What do you think they should be like? God did that all on his own. He didn't ask me. He didn't ask anybody else. So now I go to somebody else and I say, will you help me find out who I am? They're just going to tell me who they think I should be, because probably it would suit them the best if I'm that way that they tell me to be. Because they're going to do it for selfish reasons, or for the reasons that they have been thought or brought up to think is the right thing. That's a huge gamble to take, to ask somebody else. So if I can't figure it out on my own who I am, because I have limited knowledge and understanding, I don't see perfectly, I can't ask somebody else. It's no wonder we end up in a sense of feeling like there's no purpose. Because how do you figure this out? But when I come to God and I say, Lord, you made me. If I can recognize that, you made me. Now, a lot of our world's wisdom at this point in time doesn't believe that God made us. One of the predominant viewpoints that we have today is this idea that we are just here because of a process of natural selection that happened to cause us to exist. We are just the next step in a cosmic evolution. There's no real rhyme and reason for your existence. You are just the way you are because that's how things unfolded. You may as well have been somebody different. You may as well have looked different. It just so happens that you look the way you do, or you are the way you are. You're nothing more than a product of some unfolding of happenstance, of accidents. No wonder it's hard for us to think that there's purpose. But you see, when I come to Jesus and I say, Lord, no, I'm not here just because of some natural event or accident. I'm here because you made me. Why did you make? I've got somebody to ask that question of. Ultimately, if you don't believe in God, who do you ask the why question to? Who do you go to and say why? All you can do if you don't believe in God is say, why? Why? And then carry on with life and try and figure that out for yourself. I'm so glad I can go to Jesus and say, why? And actually, there's an answer to that question. It's not a rhetorical question. There's an answer. And he will tell me, I made you on purpose, and I made you for a purpose. And not only me, I'm personalizing it, but so everything that he made on purpose and with a purpose. The famous quote by Dr. Miles Monroe is this: if you don't know a purpose of a thing, abuse is inevitable. If we don't know why something was made, we will eventually abuse it. You know, if you don't know why a cell phone was made, you may think it's a fantastic hammer, and you will ultimately destroy it. You may think it's a great thing to use to nail something against the wall. You will destroy it because you're not using it for its purpose. Our basic problem as humanity is, because of our break-in relationship with God, we don't know who to ask the why questions. And then we think we're going to figure it out ourselves. And we make a horrible mess of it. And we do it by trial and error. And we do it by actually playing off other people and sometimes hurting other people to figure out who I am and abusing. But we don't have to do that. But it is tricky to go to God and say, okay, Lord, I'm going to let you tell me who I am. And when you go to God, it's my experience. I don't know if you've experienced it like this, but When I go to God and I ask him, why, Lord? You know what is the first thing he tells me? I love you. It's always his answer. His first answer is, I love you. And sometimes I go, Lord, I don't want to know you love me. I know that. That's fine. That's great. Thank you that you love me. I so appreciate it. But can you just tell me why this? Then he says, I love you. I'm like, Lord, please just tell me. And he said, you know why he does that? Because he wants us to remember that the first reason he made us is to be loved. Our purpose is about being loved. That's firstly what I'm made for. And that's often the part we've lost the most. Do you know that there's not been a moment in your life that you've not been completely and perfectly loved? You've not existed, you've not breathed one breath outside of the love of God. You may not have always experienced it, you may not have always felt it, but I promise you it's there because he made you to love you. And beginning of understanding purpose is yielding to that sense of he loves me and allowing him to love me. And from there, I can receive my purpose. So like so much else, you won't find purpose by chasing purpose. You find purpose by knowing God, and he reveals purpose to us. Amen? Amen. Thank you, Nemi.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Pastor Louis, for teaching us more about what it means to say yes to purpose. Let's now discuss this topic with our panelists. And to get us started, I'd like to ask, how do I find my purpose?
I think I'd like to answer that in a broad macro sense. There's a thing called the Westminster Catechism, which in a sense is a way of teaching doctrine with questions and answers. And in that, there's sort of a broad question about our purpose as humans on this earth. And it says the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And that is just such an incredible idea, to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. So the way that I like to look at that is to go, what are the skills, the giftings that I have? Where has God placed me? And how can I glorify God with what I've got, where he's placed me, just like that. Sometimes I think the question, what is my purpose, can be a little bit self-centered. And sometimes I think it's not always actually the right question. Perhaps a bigger or a better question to ask is, what is God's purpose? And how can I fit into that? And sometimes that will align perfectly with my gifts, my talents, my desires, my everything. And sometimes it won't. And that's okay, because I'm serving something and someone greater than myself. I'm actually currently reading a book, and it's about this private detective who is just doing what he's made to do. He's made to be a private detective, and he's doing it, and it's so awesome. It's wonderful. And I think some of us will get to do that this side of heaven, and some of us will get to do it on the other side of heaven, and that's okay. As long as we are serving God's purposes, as long as we are glorifying him with what we've got and enjoying him forever.
So I find that even with my personal journey, those things did show me how I ended up finding what my purpose was. It's paying attention. I think from the beginning, God is trying to show you who you are and why he created you, but I think we're not paying attention to it. And when I look back, I can see my personal journey was literally showing me the trait of what I was supposed to be doing.
I'd like to take some questions from the audience now.
So the question is, if you are struggling with finding your purpose, life's not always a straight line. Is there any advice that you could give?
Well, I think, first of all, if I give advice to somebody in that, is to say, don't give up on the idea that you have a purpose. No matter how difficult it gets, how lost you may feel, that's where you have to have faith and trust God. Don't give up on the idea that you have a purpose. Because if you give up, you're lost. You know, and I know it feels easier sometimes to just say, I'm just going to let happen what happened, and I'm not going to try too hard for anything. I'm just going to, let life happen to me and respond to it. And that's a way of life, but I think ultimately there's more to it than that. We've been given this opportunity by God to live purpose. But it isn't the easiest thing to discover because we find it so difficult to actually allow God to speak to us, to tell us, and to really trust Him. So I think the second thing is to, first of all, know that you have a purpose and don't give up on that. And then secondly is to trust God and His processes in your life. God's not working on our purpose when we ask Him. He works at it from we are birthed. Even before that, He's working on our purpose. And He wants you to know your purpose. He wants to reveal your purpose. So work with Him. Trust His processes. Sometimes it's going to happen by accident that you bump into it almost, and then you go, okay, that's what it is. But trust God. Find rest in Him. I think the more nervous and anxious we become about it, the harder it becomes to find it. So those are just two things that I think to add to that. But you guys.
Yeah. There's power in belonging to a community. And I believe that in addition to this, because life happens and it creates blind spots in our lives, engaging with the people in your community, people who love God, people who would be able to navigate this life with you. Sometimes there are people who are living out their purpose, but they're not aware of it. And it's only when you start discussing with other people that you realize, but I've been doing this. It's second nature. That's why sometimes it becomes difficult to recognize, simply because it's you. You were born with your purpose. You grow up to discover what it is and to continue perpetuating that.
And I think it starts with asking the question, what is my purpose? That is how I found out what mine was. I asked the question and I was ready to receive whatever answer it was. And to be honest, I wasn't very comfortable with the answer and I didn't think that I could do what He had asked me to do, but I just had to be faithful and respond to His request. And He's guiding me. He guides me every day. So I think it's prayer, very, very intentional about being introspecting and praying and journaling what He's trying to tell you. And as you journal and engage with Him, you start realizing what He's trying to do, to show you about what your purpose is.
I think it's great having some practical things for our audience to take. Next question, please.
Some people find it easy to discover their purpose, while some takes longer.
I think we often come to the Lord and we've got an idea of what our purpose and what we would like our purpose to be. And we want to ask the Lord to sort of make that possible. So we don't come with an empty heart before Him, a surrendered heart. We come with a prescriptive heart. And then so much time has to be spent by the Lord to actually get us off our program and to surrender so that He can tell us the better that He has for us. So I think that's sometimes where we struggle, is just that idea of surrender. I think fear plays a big role in that often. We're afraid we're going to miss our purpose. So we become too anxious about it. And I think that's to Mel's point, which you made earlier so wonderfully about, it's not so much what is my purpose, but what is God's purpose? Because God's purpose, I don't think, is as highly individualized as we want to make it out in a westernized world, that it's all about me. God's purpose is far bigger than that. It's about humanity. It's about all creation. And how I find my purpose in that is by following Him daily. And I think sometimes the other challenge we have, we want the perfect picture and then we want to start the journey. But often He'll tell me just a little bit I need to know to get going. And if I follow, then the next is revealed. And before I know it, I look back and I go, wow, how did that unfold in my life? But I didn't know it from the beginning. And I think that's partly because we have to trust Him along the way. And sometimes also because if He shows us the big picture right from the word go, we'll back out. We won't like it, or we won't think we can do it, or whatever. So it's that trust, walking with Him, but not having fear and surrendering to Him. That's what part of it, what I think is sometimes a factor.
Great answer, Pastor Louis. Do we have another question?
My question is, does the Lord give and take the purpose that he places on one's life, or does he give me as an individual a single purpose?
I have once heard an illustration that I found helpful personally about this. It's like when you go on a trip on a yacht, for instance, like one of these holiday cruises, and on this big ship. That ship normally leaves port and it's going in a direction. Let's say you're in a Mediterranean cruise and the cruise, is going to Rome. That's the direction you're setting in, is Rome. So that's the overall direction. But if you're on the ship, at that one particular moment, you could be walking towards the dining room. You are living a big purpose and a smaller purpose all at the same time. You may be walking the opposite direction of Rome than Rome. Rome's that way, the dining room's that way. Now I'm walking that way, but I'm still going that way also. So I think when it comes to purpose, we have to have a bigger picture to understand that, and to Mel's point earlier again, what is God's purpose? God has been busy with a purpose for longer than you and I have existed. Long before I got here, there's a purpose. Long before any of us got here as human beings on this planet, there was a purpose. God's been busy with that purpose. He's not let go of it. He's not changed his mind. He's busy with that purpose. But in that purpose, there are smaller details and parts. And sometimes I live my life in a season, and this is the purpose. I'm going to the dining room. And then God says, no, now's not the time to go to the dining room. Now you need to go to your cabin. It's time to sleep. Then I change it, but I'm still busy with a bigger purpose. And sometimes what I think about, just my personal experience about purpose, is it continuously unfolds in my life.
When I look at my past, thinking about the good and the bad that happened, would you say that that was part of God's purpose for my life?
That's a great question. I think the overriding question is, are we saying that everything that happens to me was God's purpose and plan? And I think it's important to understand that, no, not everything that happens to me was how God wanted it to happen. Sometimes we say God is in control, and people think that means that everything that happened, God made it happen. That's not true, because we live in a world where God gave us free will. We have choices, real choices. And those real choices have real consequences. God doesn't stop. If I decide today to drive over a red robot and that puts somebody else's life in danger, God's going to allow me to do that. And the real consequences of that is going to happen. But God is on the throne. He reigns. Ultimately, he will work his purposes in this world.
Yet another lively session. Thank you everyone for being part of this wonderful episode. We're having our Sunday service this morning, so join us in person or online over YouTube or Facebook. If you have any questions or would like to find out more about Hatfield Christian Church, please visit our website at hatfield.co.za. May God help you in your purpose in this coming week. Until next time, stay blessed.